Starting recording. Admit everyone into the meeting. Awesome. And we are going to get started. So welcome everyone to the Indiana Arts Homecoming. This session is Framing the Arts Conversation, Cultural Throughlines in Black Art with Joshua Thompson and Richard Allen, and also a guest speaker as well. So you'll meet her in a minute. Just a few housekeeping notes. Keep yourself muted throughout the session unless invited to unmute by the speakers. And we also ask you just during the conversation to turn your cameras off so that the main speakers can kind of be the only camera on. And then if you need to, you can rename yourself in Zoom. Just click your image, click the dots on your image. And you can also turn on captions. We have live captioning for this session. If you would like that, below in your menu bar, there's a subtitle option. And that's all that I have. So I'm going to hand it over to Richard Allen to get us going.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you all for being here today. I'm really looking forward to this opportunity to hear from Joshua. As you all know, I was supposed to be moderating this conversation with Joshua today, but something came up that has not allowed me to be there with him. And so he, in my place, will be Bailey Peja, the Equity and Impact Coordinator at the Arts Council of Indianapolis, who will do a wonderful job moderating this conversation. And thank you to her for filling in my place. And I'm glad to still be here listening to our 2020 Robert D. Beckman Jr. Fellow, especially since what he'll be talking about today emerged from his fellowship at the Arts Council of Indianapolis. So with that, I will no longer be a talking head on the screen, and I will turn it over to the two of them.
Hi, everyone, and thank you again for joining us for Framing the Arts Conversation, Cultural Throughlines in Black Art with from African Studies perspective with Joshua Thompson. So to start off, I just want to let you all know that we are currently in Gallery 924 in the presence of the gallery's first art exhibit since February and shut down. So this art exhibit that's in here is the Dahan Artist of Distinction Award exhibition, and the artwork that's behind us is by Jacinda Russell as a part of her Metaphorical Antipodes body of work. So, and just as another additional framework, this piece of art is 8 feet long or 8 feet wide. So Joshua and I are social distancing 6 feet apart, and we'll continue in these positions for the duration of our program today. So Joshua, you have had a great career as a performer and music sociologist. So tell us about where you got started.
Absolutely. So first of all, good afternoon. Yeah. I'm so glad you're able to be here, and to everyone who's out there as well. Good afternoon. We found some energy. It's a little bit dreary and rainy, so even if you're at home bundled up, this is a great way to kind of hang out and learn some stuff while staying in the comfort of your own home. So I'm really excited to be here. But to kind of answer your question and to start from the very beginning, I'm born and raised here in Indianapolis. I was born in 1982 and grew up originally over by 34th and Sutherland. And then when school started, I am a product of Washington Township. I'm a 2000 graduate of North Central High School. But I started just with a simple fascination in music, like every 2 or 3 year old does, watching cartoons. Bugs Bunny was always my favorite, so I watched Tom and Jerry and Bugs Bunny and Woody Woodpecker and Mighty Mouse, and the cartoons were fun. But I heard stuff in the background that sounded so fast, and it sounded so just engaging, and it was the classical music that was behind it. So at age 2 or 3, unbeknownst to myself, I'm listening to Wagner, or I'm listening to the Barber of Seville, and that's really where my fascination with music started. So at the age of 5, my brother and I took after our older sister, and we started taking piano lessons from a neighbor across the street, and just really took to classical music. And very early on found out that I had a natural talent and an affinity for it, and would continue to matriculate throughout elementary school and middle school and high school as an instrumentalist, as a pianist, also as a classical trumpet player. And while I enjoyed the music at every single turn, the one thing that I was always hyper aware of, even as a young kid, was between the literature that I would receive, between the music classes that we would have and who we would hear about, but also in my bands and orchestras and even other piano recitals, I would look around me and I would either be the only person of color, specifically the only Black person, or maybe one of four. You know, and you're in an orchestra with 80 to 90 student musicians, and you are one of four Black people. And so not only are you not represented in the seat and in the organizations that you're not represented. You can't find yourself in the music that you're playing. And that always was a fascination and a curiosity to me, was how is it that I love this genre so much and so many other people do, but we can't find ourselves anywhere? And that question has always continued to just persist, and it still does. That's my work now, is pulling that curtain back and elevating and exposing a canon that has been there for all time, and removing those barriers that contribute to exclusion when it comes to that. So that's what I do. The trajectory of how I went from a student musician all the way up to what I'm doing now is a little bit more detailed, and we can get into that if we have time. But that's the brief overview of kind of who I am, where I'm from, and what really started as the catalyst for what I find myself doing now.
Awesome. Well, as somebody who knows you from working with you at the Arts Garden, I love hearing the fact that you got your start playing trumpet.
Yes.
You don't strike me as a trumpet player, so I love that tidbit. But then you also had made the switch to social services. So then how did you come back to music after that experience? And then how did you incorporate that into your work right now?
Originally, the plan for my life as I knew it was I graduated high school and was on a music scholarship to DePaul University as a trumpet performance major. Went through the School of Music for, I think I made it through like sophomore year, and it just wasn't clicking for me. There's no shade to the program. It's me. It's not you, it's me. And so I switched majors from trumpet performance to sociology. And that period of time for switching was very difficult for me. Because I'd done this my whole life, and I kind of felt like a failure. I felt like I was letting folks down, not realizing that, you know, it's your life. You can do what you want with it. But I have a strong passion for sociology as it comes to community advocacy, as it comes to being a part of a voice for the voices in our community. And that's what I spent the majority of my time from graduation, probably until about 2010, going into social services. So my background was a mental health professional with Gallahue Mental Health. And I worked for years with 18 to 25-year-olds who were duly diagnosed with severe mental illness and substance abuse. So we're talking about those who live and manage and thrive with schizophrenia, bipolar disorders, schizoaffective, psychoses, and those things, and also with a duly diagnosed disorder. And then in 2008 and 2009, I leveraged that and started working with the Damien Center, which is the state's largest AIDS service organization that works with folks who were infected and infected with HIV and AIDS, and became the program director of that program for a couple years, and started doing a lot of HIV and AIDS research. And in 2009, presented data for the state of Indiana at the National AIDS Conference in Washington, D.C. And what I found between those two communities, between, if we're going to silo them up, right, mental health and then infectious diseases, especially being a Black person, being a Black gay man, I saw the same people in one institution and the next. And so that led me to believe that there's an entire community that is dealing with more than just one issue. And so we need to figure out ways in which we can address multiple issues of our community and make it convenient for the community to get the resources and the services that they need. And I took that very same approach when I came back to music, because I feel like myself and my duty and other artists, we have a responsibility to be of service. And our service looks different, but our service is empirical, it's evidence-based, as being holistic, as being healing for mental health, for the health of our community and our social ecosystems. And so I've taken the same approach with how I approach mental health and community services as I do with my programming, with my research, and with my performance. it's a service provision. And the wonderful thing about it is it's a service and you don't even have to know that it is. Sometimes it's just relaxing and it's just, oh, I love that piece of music. Don't know what it is and I don't care, but I liked it, right? Great. You know, that's a unit of service. And so all things come together. And so when I think that, oh, I'm letting folks down because I was supposed to be a trumpet player and now what am I doing? I'm glad I keep waking up and keep living, because these connections of how we use the arts and work with artists to bridge these gaps between things that seem like they have no relationship whatsoever, they absolutely do. And so that's kind of how all of this comes full circle, hence the music sociology. We're talking about systems and structures and demographics, and the music just happens to be the soundtrack to help articulate and to help take it from being academic and intellectual to being soul-stirring and relatable.
Yeah, awesome. And that's really great how you've been able to take those and pivot and combine them together. That's been really awesome.
I'm kind of surprised that it happened too. And it's like, how do you do it? I'm like, I don't know. Sometimes I don't know what I'm doing either, but I do know. And that's kind of that's a wonderful feeling. It really is.
Yeah, it's special that it just kind of comes to you and you feel peace in knowing what you're doing and how you're doing it.
I do.
Yeah, awesome. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about some of your like current performances, researching, all of that you're doing right now?
Absolutely. So what I do is, as a classical pianist and a music sociologist, I exclusively specialize in the research, the programming, and the performing of classical masterworks that are written by composers of African descent. No knock against the Beethovens and the Bachs and the Mozarts and the Chopins and the Debussys. I've played them all. I've loved them all. However, if I have to listen to a Bach prelude one more time, I'm like, hey, we've heard this 30 times, and right? The canon is bigger. I don't think classical music does itself any favors by remaining intentionally and unintentionally exclusionary. And so for that reason, it becomes this re-earthing, reimagining, and repackaging of these masterworks that are already there, and all you have to do is play them. All you have to do is listen to them, and then the canon of classical music becomes more expansive. We get to understand how Black people or other cultures use the same medium to tell either a similar story or a different one. For a historical purpose as well, in America, most folks think that our existence started at slavery, and it did not. We're going centuries back. You know, some of my repertoire and a lot of my research goes all the way back to the medieval ages when we're talking about the Moors. And it also goes as, 15th and 16th centuries of contributions from the entire diaspora of African descent that have contributed to this. So for me, that's the fun part, is to find yourself again. A couple hundred years back, and then a couple hundred years back from that, right? You can see yourself there. So I really love doing those. And clearly I like to talk. So I incorporate this very same style of conversation. You'll get this in performances of mine. One of the things that we're doing, and I love to do with this music, is I work with, you rarely will see me perform by myself. There's a strategy behind that. I'm not telling my secret here, but there's a reason why I play with other people. But I bring in visual artists. I bring in contemporary and West African and ballet dancers, culinary artists, mixologists, and we just have this fun way of mashing up things to hit all of your senses, you know, with classical pairings. It's like, what does a piece of music taste like? Well, we got a beverage for you. Or what does a glass of wine sound like? And there are pieces from my repertoire that will give you that. And then the history that goes too with it. So that's what you get a lot. It's very much edutainment that I like to do. It's a very palatable way to take this genre that seems to have so much mystique behind it, and we just strip that away. And we just become humans who all enjoy the power of music and everything else. And so that's what a performance is like. That's what a collaborative experience is like. The research itself is what research is, right?
Yep.
It's days and hours of just finding these names. And Google is for everybody. That's where you start. That's not where you end. But it just starts with a name. And it's like, okay, so let's learn about this composer as a person. Where does this person fit in the broader context of certain social movements in the period of time? Is their work always directly a reflection of it, or are they escaping their reality by creating something else entirely different? That's what the research looks like. That's why people care. It's that contextual background that allows us to frame this music, to elevate it, and to repackage and imagine it so that we don't fall into the traps that we have for the last 600 years, which is excluding masterworks for arbitrary reasons that are either based on race, class, gender, distribution, ability, or varied abilities. And so that's what this work does. Collaboration looks many different ways. And so some of the ways that you'll see it outside of a performance is, I'm a co-host of a really awesome podcast. It's called Melanated Moments in Classical Music. It's sponsored by and funded by my favorite arts and cultural organization in the state of Indiana, hands down my favorite, which is Classical Music Indy. I've had a wonderful relationship with them for the last 4 or 5 years. And my buddy Eric Salazar is presenting in a conference now, so I can't see his, and so I'm kind of bummed out about that. This is an organization that lets artists lead, and they don't tell us what to do. They ask us, how can we do this? And coming from one of my performances, it was very simple. The executive director, Jenny Birch, said, I could listen to you talk all day. Would you love to do a podcast? I'm like, yes. The only way I'm going to do it is I need an awesome co-host who's got a name that stretches the globe. And so Angela Brown, she is the international operatic soprano. She made her big break and her debut at the Metropolitan Opera as Aida in 2004. That's who I'm working with on that.
Okay.
So we're excited about that. We also were awarded the Best Black Music Podcast for 2020 from the Black Podcasting Awards. So we're excited about that, and season 2 is coming as well. And we just take these very small 15 to 20-minute sections to talk about the life and the music of contributors from the African diaspora to classical music in a very fun and light but engaging format. And this is how we in the 21st century consume information. You know, if you stop and think about some of those articles where it says this is a 5-minute read and people are like, I'm not reading for 5 minutes. I'm like, really? But that's understanding consumer culture. And if we want to permeate these cultures to have a lasting impact, we are going to have to adapt to how people consume information. And that's not necessarily going to be society's fault. It is. But seeing as how that's a given, you can either complain about it or you can adapt your own model and your own framework to make it work for both. Because if the goal is longevity and preservation beyond your own lifetime for something bigger than you, you got to get with the program and how people actually like to receive and do receive music and just be adaptive with that. So that is somewhat in a nutshell.
Yeah.
With this work recently and everything else kind of looks like.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, as you were talking about consumerism and all of that, I've recently started getting into podcasts because you can listen to them while you work, while you're in the car, all of that. So that's really great. And I can't wait to take a listen to you and Angela. Very familiar with her as a vocalist.
She's incredible, right?
Yes, amazing.
And she does her own things as well. She has her own nonprofit called Morning Brown Inc. And they, you know, much like one of our sponsors says, bringing color to the classics. She's doing the exact same thing virtually and when we could in classrooms around the country and especially here, literally being the face that someone needs to see. If I want to be an operatic singer, if I want to be an artist, but I don't know anyone who looks like me, literally just being in the room to be that visual representation that it's possible is so important. And that cannot be overstated enough because it's still not happening enough. And that's the difference between tokenism and the proper utilization of an artist. Anyone can stand in front of you. But what do they represent? What does their artistry represent? Do they know how to articulate that and share that with a group of all ages? That is where we need to be moving as arts and cultural organizations in tandem with the artists who will be doing this work.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so important for kids growing up to see people just like them doing the work that they want to do someday.
Absolutely.
So as some of you on this call may know, Joshua is our 2020 Robert D. Beckman Fellowship award winner for this year. And so for those of you who don't know, that is a $3,500 award awarded through the Arts Council of Indianapolis that supports artists in essentially any project that they would like to do to jumpstart their career. So we know that you had a very extensive fellowship and did some really amazing work. So will you tell us about that?
I absolutely will. I will start by saying this. First of all, thank you, Arts Council of Indianapolis, for it. My other colleague, who was also the other recipient, Manon Voice, just amazing. And I can't think of anyone who was more deserving of that than her. So I'm glad she got that. So thank you. Because I can, I'm just going to do it. I have a platform.
Yeah.
I would like to encourage the Arts Council and whoever funds this, $3,500 may need to be stepped up. Because it's a lot, right? I'll just leave that there. Do that with what you will. I was really excited and really fortunate to be able to actually do my site visit before the pandemic created the situation that we're in now when it comes to quarantine, when it comes to kind of containing and isolating. So I was very fortunate with the work that I want to do, like we've already talked about, the life and the research and the contributions of composers of African descent. My proposal is centered on the fact that, to my knowledge, in the city of Indianapolis, I am the only individual who was doing this work. Again, to my knowledge. I don't want to be the only person doing this work. I feel like my lane is wide open, and honestly, it'd be nice to have a traffic jam every now and then, right?
Yeah.
That would be my goal. I want to put myself out of work. And so in doing so, that means the resources that I needed, they're not here. I'll be very honest, Indiana, those resources still are not here. Our central library, we don't have compositions outside of gospel and hymns from composers of African descent. We don't have them. We don't have the music books. We don't have the faces. We don't have the people. We don't have the initiatives here that are centering this 24/7, 365. And that is a huge problem. And so for me, seeing that, rather than complain, I was like, well, I do know who does have the resources.
Yeah.
I was so fortunate to spend the month of March in Boston, Massachusetts, working and studying with, doing performances, master classes, and research with the Berklee College of Music and the Boston Conservatory, specifically with their Africana Studies program. He has since retired, but the dean of that is a gentleman by the name of Dr. Bill Banfield, a wildly prolific gentleman in the genres of classical music, of jazz, of world music, and of opera. We'll get to that in a minute. But he is the resource. And so I went to go find him. And he opened up this treasure trove of manuscripts and things where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to live this life or the next. I'm barely going to scratch the surface. So my job was to bring as much of it back as I possibly could. The man is such a huge influence in the world. And on top of all of his other accolades, he is still currently, I think through June of next year, he is a Smithsonian Research Fellow. And then he was also the president of the selection committee for this year's 2020 Pulitzer Prize in Music, which is huge. What won this year was an opera by, his name is Anthony Davis, I believe. And what won is the opera Central Park 5. It's based off of the Central Park 5 story. So there is new music, new operas that are coming out from people who look like us that are being a complete and accurate reflection, excuse me, of the times that we're living in. And I think that's wildly important. So he was a resource. So I got to do that. And it was so much fun. I love Boston. I cannot afford to live there.
Yes.
I can afford to visit, but I come back. And the whole point was to come back with that information. I've already been infusing that in the work that I do, but also my work is collaborating with other arts and culture nonprofits and other artists. All that information is not for me. And so I share it freely because that's what it's supposed to be done. So there are other pianists that I work with here. They have those manuscripts. They're learning these pieces now, which is the whole point. And I'm super excited and grateful to have been able to make that connection because it's still there. And when we're able to travel again, yes, I'm going back. I'll fund it myself. You know what I'm saying? That'd be great, right? Because we have those connections that we won't have to wait for proposals and grants. We can just fund our own projects. And I think that's really important too. So I'm just grateful I was able to go. It was an amazing month. I'm still sifting through my research, but this conversation is a wonderful presentation of my research. But much like an iceberg, the beauty is at the top, but the substratum is much deeper.
Yeah. Definitely. So, especially as somebody who's in the grant services department, we talk about all of our previous year's fellows and our workshops for the ones who are signing up for this next coming year. I've heard about your project so many times, but I've never heard about it from you.
That's awesome.
So it's great to hear about it in person.
Does it sound better in person, or does it look better in writing?
I would say equally as beautiful.
That's what I wanted to hear.
So,
thank you.
Yes, I love it. Yes. So we know that you've done this amazing fellowship and all of this research. And I've heard through the grapevine that you've been developing some curriculum and to help teach the city of Indianapolis this big piece that they've been missing for so long. So why don't you expand on that for us?
Right. And I will. So the reason why we've taken this time to kind of do this contextual background about myself is who I am as a person, and also my work is the living example of the curriculum that has been created and modified, right? Mm-hmm. So this was the whole point of going to Boston. Okay, if the resources aren't here, I got to come back and be a resource. And the way to do that is to kind of create this curriculum and this training module for local artists, but also around the state, and more importantly for arts and cultural organizations and institutions. So hence you get, I prefer to call it reframing the arts conversation, cultural through lines in Black arts movements from an Africana studies perspective. So first of all, we got to, get some basic terminology. I was like, what's a cultural through line?
Yeah.
It's a very academic way of saying it's the common thread that goes between everything, right? Within and outside of genres and mediums, right? So I will do a lot of things that traces the connections between classical music from Black composers, following that thread all the way through blues and bluegrass and jazz and bop and funk, to hip hop and rap, because we think it's not related. I'm like, yeah, it is. Follow your cultural through line, right?
Yeah.
So that's what that cultural through line is. But the whole point of the reframing part of it is there are certain standards and what we call rakes that artists hold ourselves to. And so this is the research of Dr. Bill Banfield. This is a curriculum that is already a part of the syllabus for Boston Conservatory, for Berklee School of Music. Thanks to our podcast, you have places, there's a few universities in Nebraska, I believe in Tennessee as well, just around the country that are teaching this. And so this isn't a, well, how do we know it works? It works because it's already been implemented in higher education prior to this year. So it's legit. It's not just mine. But for artists, there are 10 categories that we all hold ourselves to. So we know, how do you know you're making art, right? I'm like, well, if you're hitting these 10 benchmarks, then that's how you know it's art. It's comprehensive, right? Yeah. Artists already do that, whether we're conscious of it or not. That's what we already do. What I'm doing with that is I'm adapting and modifying Dr. Banfield's research and curriculum and saying, okay, here's what it is for artists. I want to have the conversation with arts administrators and with arts and cultural organizations, because I am of the firm belief you cannot have a mission and or a vision statement that says we support artists and we envision a world where artists sustainable, blah, blah, blah. And this is where we're in this world of like equity and diversity and inclusion. And I'm just going to be honest, I'm sick of hearing it because we're still not doing it. And the reason why we're not doing it is because the artist and the arts administration are operating out of two completely different frameworks. And guess whose framework is not accurate?
Which one?
Well, the artist is doing just fine. Artists will art, right?
Yep.
The framework's got to change for arts and culture organizations and arts administrators, funders, philanthropists. It's got to change. We are operating out of the wrong framework. The current framework is Western-based, it's mono-chromatic, and it is, I mean, it's a safe haven for European white dudes. I am none of those things, right? None of those things. The Africana Studies perspective and the Africana Studies framework automatically by design allows for the inclusion, the seamless inclusion of folks of different races, of different orientations, genders, genres, abilities, social and financial structures, right? It just naturally allows it because it's not keeping those people out for white supremacy and for patriarchy and those types of things. It's just not doing it. And so what we're looking at is changing up this framework. Arts administrators have to hold themselves to the same rakes and the same standards that the artists do if they hope to support. Because how do you know you're supporting an artist if you're not using the same metrics as the artist themselves?
Absolutely.
It's a very honest mistake, and it's an innocent one sometimes. But now that we know, all right, so let's change it up. So the way this whole curriculum works is, and I know it sounds scary, but I promise it'll be fun. We know what we're doing. I do intend with this curriculum to absolutely disrupt and replace the current framework if it is a Western European, but we will replace it with a framework that is based and rooted in the Africana studies that allows for the seamless negotiation, interaction, and holistic support from the two ecosystems of the arts administrator and philanthropist and the artist. And so these conversations can start happening. And so issues of equity and diversity and inclusion will naturally occur. And we don't have to create new positions because it's the buzzword of the, of the year. We'll just already be doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that sounds amazing. And I'm sure based on the lack of knowledge in our city, there's so much just in Indianapolis, yet alone the rest of Indiana, with all the people listening who are just in the Midwest even, that it can definitely, definitely be applied and be used. So tell us about, you talked about you have 10 key components to this consulting process. So why don't you elaborate on those a little bit? Give me a sneak peek.
So what this is, I just love the conversation, everything else. I'm not giving the cow away for free.
Absolutely.
Right? I'm going to make people buy the milk. This is just going to be a very, very brief overview. Intentionally, we have set up these thought-provoking questions and just kind of laid the groundwork for this. Because for 2021, arts and culture organizations who are out there and like, I need this training. How do I get it? Through me. Right. And so this is a negotiation that we get to have. This is a relationship, much like you bring in strategic planners, much like you bring in people to help you give, audits from top down and latitudinal, from all that for your organization. That's what this is, because it's a very intensive training. And so we have to have the time for that. And there's a cost associated with it. So I'm just going to throw that
naturally
out
there you go.
I'm trying to get paid too. But so again, we're taking, we call them the 10 C's, as in the letter C. The 10 C's of artistry. That's Dr. Banfield's work. So we have to do our homework too as artists. We got to hold ourselves to these rakes as well. Adapting the 10 C's of artistry, I'm talking about the 10 C's of arts administration. And there are 10 of them. So we start with craft, culture, creativity, community, care, commitment, courage, cultural context, conviction, and my favorite, citizenry. So there are 10 of those. And each of those bullet points, there's a lot that we can go into all of that, right? And we think a lot of times, if we're hitting one, that must be the summation of all. Or if we've got, we hit 5 out of the 6, it's got to be all 10. It's the comprehensiveness, which you could actually have 11 C's, comprehensive being the 11th one. But it's all of these rakes, all of these. Are we being citizens of our organization? Are we being citizens of the cultural ecosystem in which we live in? And if so, what does that mean? If our ecosystem is dirty, how do we as citizens clean it up? The craft and the community and the care and everything else, and the courage to be daring and to lose funders because you say, no, we are going to be comprehensive. And if so-and-so says, well, then I'm taking my money back, it's like, bye.
There you go.
Because we want to do this in sincerity. So 20 years from now, this is just our regular operating procedure where diversity, inclusion, and equity is a thing, and it does not have to be a buzzword. It's just the natural incorporation of these elements based on these components. So these are things that arts and culture administrators and organizations are really going to have to take some time over the next couple of months between now and 2021 and think about, well, what's an arts and cultures organization? What is their craft? Are we operating as a business and nonprofit and thought, or is there craftsmanship to what we're doing? What's our culture? Are we creative? Are we, again, this whole list of C's, artists already do this.
Yeah.
Arts and cultural organizations and philanthropists do not because they feel like they don't have to, but now they do. If they want to retain the high quality of artistry and keep the artists who live here, this is the only way that we stay. Because there are other places in the country that are doing it. I'm not saying they're doing it all the time or perfectly. And if their soil is more fertile, then we're going to pull up our roots and we're going to put them down there. We would like to stay here. Yeah. But if not, we out.
Yes. And as our state and our city has demonstrated, it's needed now more than ever.
I agree.
So, and I think your point saying, it's great if an organization is doing 1, 5, even 7 of these, but they need to be doing all 10. I think, it's more than just checking the boxes. It's knowing how you're interacting.
And we don't have to get it perfect the first time. I mean, we're artists. We're not getting anything perfect. But there's something to be said about pulling back the curtain and showing the process. That's endearing.
Yeah.
That community does not expect you to be perfect. We just expect high quality execution and sincerity in doing so. And so that means we can miss the mark in culture, but we're still working on it. And we're using and working with artists to make sure that we are elevating every single time.
Yeah.
So we can fly the plane and build it at the same time. It's possible.
Absolutely. So for our administrators on our call whose brains are now wide awake.
Wonderful. Yeah.
And ready and open to your consulting, how can they reach you to do this?
So very, very simple. All you have to do is shoot me an email. I don't know if you want to, can you put it? So, because it's a little bit confusing. So JOSHUA_THMPSN@yahoo.com. That's my email address. I'll also let you know how old I am if I'm still rocking Yahoo. So yeah, that's where I'm at. It's a conversation.
Yeah.
It's an email. We're interested. Tell me more. I run you over a contract and a price point. We schedule a date in 2021 and we give, whether it be your staff, whether it be your board, whether it be your volunteers. You don't have to be a music, arts. It's arts and culture, period. And we run you those trainings. The one part about it is there's some performance that's mixed into this because no one wants to sit, for 2 or 3 days just like staring at folks. I mean, like you're doing now. Yeah. So we make this a little bit more interactive. But if you're real serious, there's a serious cost to it. But I guarantee you it's a one-time cost that it'll pay for itself by the time your programming already opens. And you will have artists coming to you and you'll know where to find artists. And that's the relationship that you all want and that we need.
Yeah, awesome. Well, as an art administrator, and I know that there are several on this call, I really hope many of you take advantage of this opportunity with Joshua. I've worked with him just on the artistic level. He's amazing. As you can tell from this conversation, it's been awesome. So we have about actually 20 minutes left. We got through that content really fast.
We planned this perfectly. We were like maybe 15, 20 minutes. That's perfect. Good.
Exactly. Good. So as you can tell by us being here in person, Joshua really wants this to be a conversation. So I'm monitoring the chat, hence why I have my laptop right here. So if anyone has any questions for Joshua that they would like to ask, this is the time. If you want to ask, over video, please feel free to unmute, turn your video on, so that way we can see and hear you from our spot right now. So feel free to do that. And so let the Q&A begin.
Let's do it.
So also, as we're kind of waiting for people to submit some questions here, we have a couple of fun comments. Miss Lydia said, yes, Joshua. And I'm thinking of it like with the snaps, like, yes.
Hey, Lydia, thank you. You right, yes.
Yes. And then, please forgive me if I'm getting your name wrong, but I think Miss Alice Cavanis Gober said, time to make inclusion systemic. So
I don't know if I could say that, any better. Make it systemic, make it endemic, make it contagious. Yeah, I mean, all of those words for that. Let's turn the words we don't like in 2020, let's turn them around. What was her name?
Alice, I think.
I'm going to start quoting you. Make inclusion systemic. There's a mission. Okay, I love that. Thank you. Go. That's awesome.
So, and she put yes.
Can I say hi? Can I say hi to Joshua and Stephanie? Hi, this is Alice. I just wanted to know you did say my name correctly. It's awesome. Just Alice. It's just spelled funny. And I just really, really love everything you're saying as a administrator of a very small nonprofit in Hamilton County in Noblesville, Indiana. Everything you're saying is what we've been trying so hard to figure out how to do, and I I take so much from what you're saying, in spite of the fact that I know that the Indianapolis area, Marion County, is so much more diverse than perhaps where we are here in Noblesville and Hamilton County. But I feel like that diverse artistry is out there of all kinds, and to keep trying to reach those people and to try to create an inclusive organization is both a challenge and just so much fun in some ways, which may sound a little crazy, but looking at your list of 10, and kudos to the wonderful professor in Boston for that. But I mean, I actually copied and pasted that. Thank you, Bailey, for typing it out in the chat. I copied and pasted that because I want us to go over that as my little small board and try to work on every single one of those. So thank you. I'm going to mute myself now because I've said enough. But
before you do, if you feel comfortable doing so, can you tell me the name of the arts and cultural organization where you are? And I say it because of this, just as certain folks who live outside of Marion County assume that this place is more diverse, sometimes people in Marion County assume that there is no diversity outside of it, and that's not true. So I hear you, but I also myself have to challenge my own misconceptions and assumptions about what I think about Noblesville and whatever else, right? So I hear that loud and clear, and shouldn't have assumed about Indianapolis itself. But I'm a longtime resident of Noblesville, Indiana. I grew up here. My family moved here from Georgia in the 70s. I am a disabled artist and writer, and the nonprofit that I'm the president of is one that I started myself, and it's called Community Education Arts, and our website is cearts.org. And at everyone's leisure, go and see what we're doing. And we have reached out to a lot of Indianapolis area musicians and artists lately to come on our podcast, and it's just been fabulous to have diverse voices. I don't know how else to say that. Diverse voices and perspectives, from beyond the Noblesville, Hamilton County area coming on and talking to us about their arts journey. So what you're doing is so inspiring, and I just wanted you to know that I've been following what you're doing for quite some time now through social media, and I just was so looking forward to this session to be able to hear firsthand a little more about what you're doing. And so I really thank you for doing this session and for everything you've been doing. Thank you. We'll be in touch.
Okay.
But we'll talk. Yeah. We'll talk.
Okay. Bye-bye. I'm a mute now. Let other people talk.
So Alice, I wrote your information down so we can give it to Joshua. And then Richard had asked, is there any print collateral or a website that attendees can refer to for more information?
On me? So look at Joshua Allen, Allen on Facebook. That's how you find me. I am also Sock Joplin on Instagram because I never wear shoes when I play, so I always come with my fun, colorful socks. My website's being updated, and or the email that I provided. I find sometimes a little frustrating as I don't get to spend as much time being a creative and an artist, and I'm spending more time curating web pages and marketing on it, and it's getting old, it's getting annoying. Sometimes the best way to do it is just like you literally just come over to my house and hang out. Or you just kind of see what I have going on Facebook and what those dates are coming up and just track and trend. And I'm usually tagging a lot of my other fellow artists. That's another way to figure out, what's going on with myself and my work, but as it relates to other artists who have their own collaborative and independent projects as well.
Yeah, awesome. So keep the questions coming if you guys have more. So I've seen you perform several times. Will you elaborate on why you perform in your socks and why you're here in just socks right now? If you want to answer.
I do. Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good. It's most like when we were in school, the way that you study for a test is how you end up taking the test. Very much like the way that you practice is how you perform. And so for the last several years, it was just always without my shoes on.
Yeah.
And the socks it's fun, and I make them as loud as I possibly can. It's also that's that little thing sometimes that catches audience members, right? If there's this mystique about classical music is so hoity-toity and uppity, and then someone comes out with like some weird socks.
Yeah.
it takes that mystique down just a little bit. And that's the whole point. So now I've got you that way.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. So sometimes the socks are more fun than my playing, which is fine. But it also reminds me to not take myself so seriously. I'm a very serious person, and I have a very, very high standard for anything and everything that I do. I wear myself out. So sometimes it's just a reminder to look down and say, man, like, there's so much joy that you still get in this. I feel like I was put on this earth to do it. Yeah, we can toil, but let's enjoy the process and the journey and the fruits of our labor. And so sometimes that sucks. I have not paid for my own pair of socks in about 3 years. So if most folks, when they come to shows in lieu of flowers, they bring socks. I just think that's so cool. And so I don't plan on buying socks again for another 3 years. So keep them coming.
Yeah, we might have to get you a pair of Arts Council socks.
Please do. Please do.
So we got actually 3 questions popped up here in the chat. So what is the most interesting thing you've discovered about composers of African descent while you were in Boston?
We're everywhere. And we always have been. Like, always have been. Much like people sometimes in the literary world have to, have, pen names. That was a tactic here as well for Black composers, also for Black women composers, for sure. Just everywhere. And what I love is finding how many compositions, one composer might have had, or wrote for opera and wrote for this. One of the most incredible things, and I confirmed when I was in Boston, but also found out in my own research as well, is just how collaborative a lot of these composers were anyway. One of my favorites is there's a piece that I do. It's a real fun, quick piece by William Grant Still. He's often known as the Dean of Classical Music for African Americans. Just a prolific portfolio and repertoire of his. One of the songs that he made was composed because his buddy Zora Neale Hurston was in Haiti for a while and was learning cultural dances that were indigenous to the people there. And she came back, and just as however they hung out in Clara, she showed them the dances, and here comes this composition. So the inspiration and the nexus and the network of how we as just people naturally create and what we draw from inspiration, none of that's new either. Yeah. Right. And so when we look at it that way, my question that's kind of rolling in my head, what I think I'll spend a lot of time next year doing is, when it comes to Black arts movement specifically, we always talk about the Harlem Renaissance. And then a lot of times we talk about the Black Power movement that came right after that. But in my head, I'm thinking, but this always happened. So let's look for the other Black arts movements that have already happened that just aren't in the history books. They did happen. And there's more than 2, So let's go unearth those. And so I think that's where I'm going to spend and focus a lot of my my research and my energies for the next couple of years, is uncovering and unearthing the Black arts movements, probably from the 1600s up through now, that we have not talked about, but they happened anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure, while you were in Boston, I'm sure there was so much more that you wanted to dive into. And
honestly, yeah, but the thing I wanted to dive into more, and I did the first day and the last day and every day, was the shellfish was on point. I'm just going to be real. I had a half thing of oysters on the half shell, and I was like, listen, Boston, do it again. I loved it. The crab legs and everything, and a lobster roll. It's what you want.
Yep.
It was awesome.
Yes. I was in Boston visiting a friend, and she was like, before you leave, you have to get the lobster roll.
And I did.
So anyone visiting Boston after the pandemic,
they freeze well. Send one back.
There you go. So Stephanie asks, what's your favorite venue you've ever performed in?
I don't think I've played in it yet. It's coming. Do I have a favorite? I don't know. Performances and venues are, both of them are interesting because for me, it's not about the destination. It's about the trajectory, and each venue has a special place for me. My own home is a venue. And so for a special reason, my own salon is my favorite.
Yeah.
Being able to play on the almost a year ago today, I was playing on the cabaret stage, and that was a goal of mine. I reached that. Earlier this summer, I played on the stage for Lotus World Music and Art. I loved it. And that was a goal of mine since 2015, and to finally reach it, that stage means so much. I'm getting a little emotional. So They all are. And I don't mean to sound trite and like, oh, everyone's a winner, but they are. Like when your journey is yours and it's so personal, you're grateful for a stage, big or small.
Yeah.
You're grateful for any audience, 1 or 1,000, because that connectivity you get is what makes it. The space in the venue is just a space in the venue. It has no personality. The audience and the artists bring it, and they take it with them when they go. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. And as a previous IU grad, I love hearing that you were at Lotus. It
was so much fun.
Yeah.
What was it? I think
such it was a party there.
The first year I went, and this was like, what is this? There was a clogging and Irish fiddle group, and they smashed. And that's not even my thing, but I was like, okay. And then the next group that came, it was an Afro-Cuban electric punk group. And I'm like, I don't even know what this is. And then I heard it and I was like,
and you were like, all right.
And ever since then, I was like, one day I will play Lotus. And I did that September 27th of this year with ballet dancer Tony Moore and with a brilliant vocalist, Ashley Baskins. They are Ashley Baskin. They're both here locally. And we just had so much fun together. Had so much fun doing it.
That's amazing. So Sarah Norman had said that you were awesome at Clockwork concerts.
Oh, fun. Yeah. Was awesome.
And was asking if you're going to participate again.
Unfortunately, no. That was such an awesome program. So Clockwork, it's started by Scott Jans. He goes by Clockwork Jones. Amazing oboist, composer, conceptualizer. The whole Clockwork thing is we have 24 hours. It's a bunch of us. We don't know who's going to be in a group. We pull from a hat. And we have 24 hours to come up with an artistic thing. And so I think last year it was myself and Scott, and she goes by Max Maneater. She's a burlesque dancer, and she's like they are a gender bender.
Yeah.
And it was just fun. And so I had some ragtime stuff, and it was just, it was so much fun. I think there was about 20 of us who did it. And this year, fortunately, since it went off so well, you win $1,000. So I highly encourage everyone to do it. Unfortunately, I will not be able to. I've got a lot of performances between now and November 22nd. I'll be at the Palladium on November 22nd. So there's another stage.
Yeah, another plug.
And then I've been working a whole lot for the last 3 or 4 years. And so I'm taking the last 6 or 7 weeks of this year. I'm taking it off, and I'm getting on a plane, and I'm going to an undisclosed location, and I'm not coming back until the first week of January. So I'm excited to rest and to kind of refuel because I'm tired. But I'm having fun, but I'm tired.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking about this before. That's just more important than ever to get away, turn your phone off, no devices, because how often do we get to do that now?
We don't. It'll be hard.
Yeah.
But I promise you, after day 3, we'll be fine.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
Maybe after hour 3, you're
it could be that.
All right. Awesome. So just reading some more comments, Richard had said he knew you'd find a way to plug in the food.
Oh, come on now, yo. Don't look like it, but I like to eat.
And then Sally Gaskell, she's an associate professor at IU.
Fantastic.
Actually had Richard and I in class.
Oh, cool.
And she just said her OffRoad Lotus World Music Festival in Bloomington. Happy you played there. So
her what?
Happy you played there.
At
Lotus,
yes, it was so fun. It was a wonderful experience, and it was interesting because the director was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, it has to be like in this format." And I think that's the thing for artists and creatives. We just want to do it, and so it wasn't a thing to apologize for. Now we were there on site, but it was virtual and they live stream. For me, the goal was to play the festival, and I did it. In 5 years, no one's going to be like, oh, that was pandemic year. It's still on my resume that I played the festival. We like the stages that we're in. We like the opportunities. And so even in the midst of a global pandemic and even in the midst of, civil and racial unrest and everything else, don't apologize for those things, we still take full advantage of every platform that we're given. That's our job, and we enjoy doing it.
Yeah, and absolutely. And right now, artists are finding new ways and every day to adapt.
Yes.
Richard had asked, which of the 10 C's do you feel is the most urgent for our community?
All of them.
Yeah, all 10.
All
Remember,
10.
you don't
Listen,
just do
if
one
we can
or
chew
5.
gum and walk at the same time, we can multitask on these. I love the question. But I would respond and say, go back and read out loud 1 through 10. And then you'll understand why there is not, it's all or nothing. You can't just take one. and start first. You do them all. I get it. That can feel overwhelming, and there's a way that this curriculum shows you, because there's a lot of things. I'm not saying throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? There are certain components of the frameworks that we're operating in that that work. Also, there are folks who are working in things where you're already doing some of these things, whether you're aware of it or not. And so we're just going to pull it out to be like, hey, welcome to intentionality. So it's got to be all of them. Yeah. No, it has to be. It has to be all of them. You don't pull out one and start first and think it's going to get the job done, because it's not going to. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm sure there are a lot of people on the other side of this. If you were in a live audience, you'd see some head nods, some snaps.
Right on.
Yes. So we got about 5 minutes left. And another question popped up here. So Ms. Ursula Kuhar, who's actually my mentor.
Oh, cool.
She said, what are some organizations or who are some artists that have inspired you and what you're doing right now? I'm sure the list, you like roll out the scroll.
Long. I'm like, I'll send you an email that's this long. Like I said, again, in my opinion, in my experience, and it is, just my experience, the best organization I've worked with in this state, hands down, has been Classical Music Indy. They just get it. And they're not even a huge operation when it comes to internal capacity and numbers, and they're nailing it. Can't rave about them enough. Morning Brown Inc., like I said as well. Mentor, encourager, the person who's really Angela Brown herself. I was intimidated as all get out the first time I met her and was going to perform with her. And she has taken great time and care and patience to mold me in certain ways. I'm still teachable. I'm a student for life. I have an identical twin brother. His name is Jared Thompson. He is a brilliant composer and saxophonist and band leader of Premium Blend. Check him out.
Awesome.
Richard Sleepy Floyd, an amazing touring drummer of Native Son. Brandon Meeks, a bass player who was actually in the, I believe it was in the Miles Davis biopic that came out a couple years ago with Don Cheadle. I literally do not have enough time. Manon voice I listen. I don't think that the citizens of Indianapolis, philanthropists, arts and culture organizations, are just people. And we have traveled this country a lot doing this. And in certain places like Austin being a good example, there are so many different types of music there. You'll go from one bar and it's blues, the next one is punk. And so there's that. And Indy's kind of struggling with that. But the level of musicianship, you're hard pressed to go anywhere in the country outside of your usual places like your Chicago and New York. The level of musicianship and artistry here is so high.
Yeah.
It is unbelievably high. And so really tap into your networks or develop them. Just because you have a brick and mortar, just because you built it, don't assume they're coming to you. We've got to go out to the community. You got to go to the neighborhoods that you think are too scary to go to. There are some diamonds in the rough and just some out and out gems sitting right on top. And the only difference between that and another place on the north side would be like your sidewalks don't come together. You can see where the money in the city cuts off, and that's on purpose. We're here. We want to stay here. Indianapolis has it so good when it comes to the depth, the richness, and the high acumen of art and artistry here.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Jenny Birch had said, much love for this session and for the Classical Indie plugs. Thank you very much.
I love her. She's awesome. That whole team, that whole staff is dope. I could rave about them all day.
Yes, they're amazing. So we have 2 minutes left. Any final comments or anything for our viewers?
Support looks many different ways, and it's collaborative. I've been talking with a lot of, folks at CICF and at other higher level things and everything else. When you're talking about how do we support and the 10 C's, what do I do between now and January when we kind of hire you to do this? Put money in the artist's pockets. Do not make us go to a nonprofit and write a grant every time. If we're worried about, will artists be good stewards or we will. You already know. That's why you call us to do things. That's how we're going to survive. That's how we're going to keep our income. That's how we're going to be able to keep creating, and we will pour it back into the community. Money and support has to go directly to the individual artist first. Let's remove the middleman. And for some of you arts and cultural organizations, legit, that means you will not be here in 2 or 3 years. And that's okay, because there's a place for you. You will find another place that works way more effectively, but that's part of that courage. That's part of that citizenry in these 10 C's. Things are not going back to the same, and don't look for them to, but we have an intervention ready to go.
Mm-hmm. So unintentionally, Box the Artist had asked throughout your different experiences outside of Indianapolis in terms of equity, what are the top pieces of advice you would offer arts organizations to move beyond inclusion and what you're seeing in other places and what they're missing the mark? So I feel like you just perfectly answered that question. She said that she approved and liked the answer that you gave.
That's what's up. She's an incredible artist too. I think that's the other part. Mm-hmm. She and I have had opportunities to meet and witness each other in the moment, but also just as people. Yeah. Again, you will trip over artists and creatives in the city and entrepreneurs. Absolutely. And so start tripping over them.
Yeah.
Just pick them up and put money in their pocket when you do.
Absolutely. Yes. Paid artists. That's what we're here for.
Do it.
So it is now 3:00. And so I just want to thank everyone who has viewed in on this session for joining in on us, listening to everything that Joshua has had to say. Hopefully this was very eye-awakening for you.
I hope so.
And I'm putting his email in the chat one more time. So you arts administrators, reach out to him and talk about how you can reach all 10 of those C's.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you to the Arts Council for letting us use the gallery, for the Indiana Arts Commission for selecting me for this. And I do hope I sincerely hope you all found it beneficial. And this is just the beginning. The conversation starts after this. The work starts after this. This is just your preview. So again, thank you. I do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Awesome. And thanks to the Arts Commission for letting us be here today. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, everyone. See you in half an hour.
Alrighty. Do you want to?
Yeah.